episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show. We're bringing you another fascinating guest today who is helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Krogsgaard Thomsen, who is Chief Executive Officer of the Novo Nordisk Foundation, which is an international foundation. It has a dual objective, one which is to provide a stable basis for the commercial and research activities within the Novo Group, of which Novo Nordisk Pharmaceuticals is the largest part of that, as well as to support scientific, humanitarian, and social purposes. In 2020, the foundation had a net worth that was over $73 billion, making it the largest financial endowment in the world. The foundation owns Novo Holdings, a majority shareholder of Novo Nordisk, as well as Novozymes, a global leader in industrial enzymes, as well as 75 other assets. Originally trained as a veterinarian, a doctor of veterinary medicine from the Royal Veterinary and Agricultural University, now part of University of Copenhagen. Dr. Thomsen also holds a doctorate in that domain as well. He started his career actually as a PhD in pharmacology at the University of Copenhagen. He worked for a few years at LEO Pharma, and then 30 years ago joined Novo Nordisk, initially as head of growth hormone research, moved to senior vice president of diabetes R&D, and in 1995 he was appointed senior vice president of discovery, and then eventually in 2000 became executive vice president of R&D and chief scientific officer. And over those years he has headed the development of dozens of medicinal drugs, including within the diabetes franchise, including groundbreaking development of glucagon-like peptide-1 technologies. Dr. Thomsen has served as the president of the Danish Academy of Technical Sciences, chairman of the board of the University of Copenhagen, and he's also an adjunct professor of pharmacology there now. A lot to talk about. Dr. Krogsgaard Thomsen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show.
Thank you.
Dr. Thomsen, I very much enjoy going into the publication background of our guests within the peer-reviewed literature, and in the search on you, there is a clear delineation between when you were doing research in contact dermatitis and UTIs and leukotriene synthesis in companion animals, and then when you started publishing about insulin secretagogues and growth hormones and hemophilia factors. Take us back a little bit, if you would, to the beginning, why you decided on veterinary medicine, what got you into pharmacology and the human side after that.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a funny story because I've always loved animals. I'm a dog person, and I visited the family's farm every summer holiday with all the big domesticated animals, cattle, pigs, and so on. So it was kind of natural for me to go in that direction. But already after the first year of the studies, I met a young PhD scientist who got me hooked on research. He was doing some very hot research, and later on in the studies, I decided actually to write a book about pharmacology, a textbook of pharmacology, and that really got me into pharmacology, which has been my life ever since the contact dermatitis stuff, which I did for a year or two. Since then, it's been pharmacology.
And one of the things I have to ask about before we get into the Novo Nordisk Foundation, as I was going through your papers, one from 2006 really stood out. And I was looking at this and I thought, he must have written this recently, but this was 15 years ago. And it was a paper entitled Global Health, the Ethical Responsibility of the Pharmaceutical Industry. And in this paper, you talk about the so-called triple bottom line, whereby obviously pharmaceutical companies need to make a profit, but at the same time, we have to think about the environment. We have to think about the social bottom lines. And you give this great example about, I think, neglected tropical diseases where, Novo, we're not good at those things, but we're pretty good at pharmacology and stem cells and all sorts of other research. Talk about, why you wrote this paper back in 2006, which obviously a lot of people are referencing this paper today. It seems like you would have written it in 2021, but talk about this paper a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, well, I recall meeting a journalist from Danish television, and we discussed whether the pharmaceutical industry should actually go in the forefront of not only giving medicines, but also making sure that there was equity in healthcare and so on. And we decided not to, because I talked to my peers in the company, and they thought maybe it was not the best idea of a chief scientific officer to go ahead with such a book. But we ended up writing this small paper, a couple of us back in 2006, and it's been on top of my mind already before then, that as an industry we have a responsibility both to innovate but also to create access to those innovations and make sure that all the elements that contribute to human health should be in a good order. And I still feel like that, and that's also what we do in the foundation, as you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And moving to the Novo Nordisk Foundation, obviously you have a broad purview, focus on improving people's lives. You have, a broad, wide-ranging set of interests in terms of research, but also education, innovation. Walk us through a little bit about the foundation, if you would. I talked a little bit in the intro, the structure and sort of some of its holdings. And then also, I come out of my big pharma experience was at GlaxoSmithKline. Obviously we had our R&D budget. We also had a venture capital arm called SR1, which took on a little more risky initiatives. Talk a little bit about how at Novo you sort of, wearing this hat of, you're head of R&D, now you're head of the foundation, you have venture initiatives as well. How you decide what becomes a pharma initiative, a venture initiative, or a foundation initiative?
Well, in many ways, it's very clear, because the Novo Nordisk Foundation, even though we are the majority owner of Novo Nordisk, we operate at arm's length. So it says in my bylaws of the foundation that we should be a solid and good owner of Novo Nordisk and make sure that the, you can say, research foundation of the company has good conditions to operate under. So we don't at all interfere with what the company does, but we are kind of, you can say, setting the stage by having a research environment in Denmark that is of such a character and quality that it justifies that Novo Nordisk and Novozymes, they retain their R&D headquarters on Danish soil, so to speak, because the Danish education system, the PhD level, the infrastructure, everything is in such a good shape that our companies can attract the right talent with the right background and have a fertile environment in which to do research. Of course, their research is global, but they're still headquartered in Denmark in both companies. And that's part of our mandate. What we more than do is to follow our strategy, which has to do with the human health and health of the planet. We want a healthy planet, and we want healthy humans, and we want a healthy life science ecosystem to support that.
And one of the areas which obviously you made a lot of waves in recent weeks is the announcement of the Novo Nordisk Foundation Center for Stem Cell Medicine, called Renew, established between 3 centers: University of Copenhagen, Leiden University Medical Center in the Netherlands, and then Murdoch Children's Research Institute in Australia. 300 million euro over 10 years. And stem cells has obviously been one of those areas, a tremendous amount of promise. Some areas which have moved slower than others, but it seems with this unique Renew model, you're looking at all of them. So you're looking at stem cells as potential screening candidates for new drugs. You're looking for traditional stem cell therapies, and you're doing some very advanced sort of gene editing for the future. Talk a little bit about how you went about setting this up. Who decided, okay, stem cells, this is going to be a major part of the foundation's initiatives moving forward. Take us a little through this really amazing set of programs.
Well, back in the 90s, when I was head of research at the Novo Nordisk company, we did quite a lot of basic stem cell research, first in mice and then later on human cells. And I was kind of struck a few years ago by how much progress had been made, not only in Denmark, but all over the globe. So for 2 decades, we were working on identifying differentiation algorithms for these omnipotent stem cells to turn them into whatever cell type that is needed in the human body. And a few years ago, we came to realize that we were getting right to where we needed to be to start translating this basic research into potential curative medicines. I mean, implanting the cells that are lost in Parkinson's disease, in type 1 diabetes, in heart failure. That dream was about to become closer to reality. So the foundation had actually been running a basic research center for stem cells for 10 years called DanStem. They've done excellent research, but they were not really so translational. So one of the first things I did as CEO of the foundation was to kind of decide with my board of directors that we will tune down the basic research center because they've had success for now 10 years, and then we'll take it to the next level with the Renew Center that you just elegantly described, Denmark, Netherlands, Australia, where there's so much synergy to be harvested between those principal investigators and the technologies that differ between the sites. But in aggregate, they will help us, I think, translate some of these basic discoveries into future human curative therapies for chronic diseases. So I'm really excited. And the idea is that 2 + 2 + 2 equals not 6, but 8 or 10 even. That's the theory behind this international center.
And within the broader portfolio, you have what is known as the Bio-Innovation Institute. You established this back in 2017, and within this, 85 active projects from various startups from Denmark and other Nordic countries. And I thought it was very interesting because you highlight specifically not just research here, but innovation and entrepreneurship, which is something, as we all know, you could be a great scientist, but at the end of the day, when it comes to putting something, translating something, or commercializing, we have to have all of these skills put together. Talk a little bit about the Bio-Innovation Institute, if you would.
Yes, well, the thing is that Denmark has, for many, many years, been, relatively speaking, in the forefront of good science, many publications and so on, but we are not and have not been in the forefront of translating all that excellent science into true innovation. So translational science, creating new companies, startups that actually one day might create, value and new medicinal products for Denmark and for the world, has not been, you can say, a stronghold. So the idea was to facilitate the transfer of academic science from the labs in Danish and Scandinavian universities and out there to get them going in the early phase of their life. And then our holding company, Novo Holdings, can be one of the many, you can say, facilitators of later phases in their life. But there's been a valley of death, so to speak, between the labs at universities and then the early embryonic life of you can say, spin-out innovation. And that's what we wanted to facilitate by having a serial entrepreneur, Dr. Jens Nielsen, who now heads the BII, the Bio-Innovation Institute. And as you said, he has literally been able to spin out 80+ projects into either now existing small startup companies or soon-to-be companies. And I think it's been a bigger success than I would have thought. And already early last year, a year exactly ago, they were spun out now as an independent foundation under the Novo Nordisk Foundation, and we fund them every year.
And you've walked us now through frontier-type technologies with the Stem Cell Renew program, Bio-Innovations Institute teaching scientists how to become entrepreneurs and vice versa. But now you also have to think of the next generation, and Novo Nordisk Foundation 2018 set up the LIFE program, ultimately with the main goal, strengthen public knowledge as well as education and research in relation to natural sciences, especially among young people, young children. Talk about the importance of this part of the portfolio in keeping that next generation interested in the natural sciences and not other things, investment banking or all sorts of other stuff they could be going into nowadays.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Denmark has historically not had a very strong teacher. I mean, our school teachers, many of them have not really specialized and haven't really understood the newest developments within natural and technical and health sciences. They simply are not educated to really be able to grab all the new stuff. So on the one hand, we actually have programs that specifically target better education and also education for existing teachers, such that they are better equipped to understand all the new things that are happening with the green transition of the society and all the new developments that are happening, which are exciting. But the LIFE Foundation is also a foundation that we spun out a year ago, and they specifically have the mandate to ignite and make shiny eyes in all the kids when they think about natural, technical, and health sciences. They should feel they want to go into STEM educations. And historically, way too many have gone into other areas where maybe societal needs are smaller. And this is one way of actually equipping them both with mobile laboratories that drive around in Denmark, and they can do experiments in these mobile labs that which are based in huge trucks actually that drive around to schools in Denmark, that they could never even contemplate on doing in their own labs because they're not equipped for it. And they can also come and see our foundation center, which has a campus where people, classes, many classes every week will come, do experiments, and be thrilled and enthused, and hopefully some of them will remember that as they start and go to the college grades and later on universities. That's the ambition, and it's something we also are going to fund over the next 10 years. Hopefully, kids that are more excited and also teachers that are more well equipped.
And moving now from frontier research through the social programs, and now the more humanitarian focus, a theme that I saw at the foundation's website was this concept, and we've heard this before. While we might think of the low or medium income countries as infectious diseases being the major influence on health, we're seeing dramatic rises as we are in the developed world in terms of the chronic degenerative diseases rapidly increasing, and in many cases sort of surpassing what we see on infectious disease front. Obviously, we've been in a pandemic the last couple of years, and that might have obscured some of it, but talk a little bit about how Novo Nordisk Foundation looks at the issue of chronic diseases and how you balance sort of the humanitarian interest of the infectious and the non-infectious diseases.
Chronic diseases, we have a major focus on cardiometabolic disease, and I define cardiometabolic disease as a spectrum that ranges from obesity in childhood through to obesity in adults, leading to type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, fatty liver disease, and certain other chronic diseases that are all interlinked. So this whole spectrum of cardiometabolic disease is the #1 killer on earth. It's a more frequent killer of people than cancers in aggregate. And so we felt that with our heritage, 100 years of work on diabetes as a non-communicable chronic disease, it was natural for us to expand the disease focus into the whole cardiometabolic disease area. And we're doing that on two fronts. One is on the scientific front. So we're actually sponsoring research at the highest level at big research centers like the Center for Basic Metabolic Research, but also looking into securing equity in healthcare when it comes to non-communicable diseases, in particular diabetes. So you will see us strengthen in areas of the world where there's been most focus on malnutrition and infectious disease, but where we are seeing the emergence of type 2 diabetes and similar conditions to come up on the top 3, 4 problems in those societies where they're not equipped to deal with it. A, from an education perspective, and B, from an infrastructure perspective, and making sure that they can actually handle the problem, diagnose it, and ultimately ensure that people get access to treatment. So we both take a view on focusing on securing more, you can say, education, equity in healthcare and so on, and at the same time, in the other end of the spectrum, making sure that high-end research makes it all the way out there so that we can have future medicines that are better equipped to do, or maybe even precision medicine, realizing that diabetes and cardiovascular disease is not just one or two diseases. It's a sum of different sub-entities that we one day might be able to handle with what I call precision medicine. So you target specifically the type of disease that you as an individual have, rather than shooting very broadly. So we are very active, and also want to do programs in areas such as India, where they are going to have the leading diabetes problem of the world. And in big parts of that huge country, we think we can make a difference by securing better education of nurses, doctors, and so on, so that they are equipped not only for tuberculosis, etc., but also for diseases to treat diseases such as diabetes and cardiovascular.
Excellent, excellent. And speaking of, you talked about cardiovascular disease being the #1 killer. Once again, as I was reading about you the last couple of weeks before this show, a very interesting 2014 article came across my desk entitled "Drug Makers Look to Push the Boundaries of Old Age." And in this article, it highlighted at the time you had set up an interesting collaboration with the University of Copenhagen, Oxford, and Karolinska Institute, broadly looking at healthy aging. And this theme is one that has gotten a lot of traction in recent years. We've done several episodes on our show. You were specifically, I think, talking about how you potentially could use some of the type 2 metabolic knowledge in Alzheimer's disease. I'd love to sort of just get your thoughts now. And we're in 2022. We see sort of the formation of a sort of an embryonic anti-aging pharmaceutical segment that is looking not sort of at the diseases of old age, but actually aging processes itself. coming from this 2014 article, just give me your top line on sort of where the global pharma industry is in terms of healthy aging, and where you may be interested in going with this. I don't know if you're focused on it at all at the foundation, but give me top line on healthy aging and pharmaceutical anti-aging, if you would.
Yeah, so healthy aging, that's a really hot topic for several reasons. One of them being that we all of us getting older. As we get better at treating, cancer and cardiovascular disease, we will get older, and we all want healthy aging over time. And there are many theories ranging from the chromosomes shorten their telomeres until one day the cells can't divide any longer, and that stops us from living any further, through to chronic low-grade inflammation being present with age. And that chronic low-grade inflammation can be, leakiness of the guts, so that certain microbes and inflammatory agents find easier access to the body and start creating inflammation, in the cardiovascular system, in the liver, in the brain even. So there are many theories underlying what can help us create a more healthy aging situation for each individual. And as a foundation, with our cardiometabolic disease focus, we're actually looking into also supporting that kind of research, developing more healthy aging. I would say that there are actually certain medications, GLP-1 class of medicines, that have shown to work on different organs, somewhat surprisingly, that are all affected by the aging process. So, I think there are many in the pharmaceutical industry and in academic research who all want to contribute there a little bit. We haven't found the Holy Grail, exactly what is the one thing or the most important things that can lead us to a healthy aging process. But a lot of experiments are ongoing in animals where you can actually treat the lifespan of animals with everything from fasting to certain medications and living conditions. So it's an exciting area.
It's when I Google the foundation, it seems like there's a new press release every day of a new grant that you've given. I saw one come across my desk just a day or so ago on the Novo Nordisk Foundation grant for Syrian refugees. There were some others in terms of dose compliance. I'm just going to hand you back the floor, Matt, just to talk a little bit. I've talked about some of the major projects. Please highlight other things that I might have missed that may be at the of those dozens of projects that you may want to highlight on the show while we have you.
Yeah, well, I think we haven't spoken so much about the climate mitigation strategy, and we created the first CO2 research center at Aarhus University some months ago, an international center together with Stanford University and several others, where as the first ones, we'd really like to spur innovation, scalable, cost-effective innovation that can either capture greenhouse gases from the atmosphere or avoid that they are emitted, whether it's from industry where CO2 is emitted, or from agriculture where nitrous oxide and methane gas is emitted, either from the soil or from cattle, respectively. So on the climate side of things, we are really wanting to do our bit when it comes to understanding how can we have a CO2 neutral society by 2050. This is an example of a mission-driven research center. Professor Alfred Sporman, the Stanford professor who's come to Denmark to lead the center, he has ways of monitoring year after year, is he making small inroads into new technology that biologically or chemically can reduce CO2 emission or capture CO2 and use it for more beneficial purposes, such as biofuels, feedstuffs, etc. So on the climate thing, we focus both on greenhouse gases, but also on more healthy, nutritious food, because we're a globe that is going to grow from 7.8 billion to 11 billion people during this century. And that means that if we want to avoid deforestation and an aggravation of the climate crisis, we need to be able to have greater output, higher yields on the field, so to speak, by using biological solutions rather than herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides. And that bioagricultural approach, also having plant-based food that can substitute some of the egg, milk, cheese, and beef that we're eating today. Not necessarily all of it, but what can do as good a job and still taste nice. That is something we want to spur innovation in that area, because we think human health is contingent upon planet health. And that means that if we have a healthy planet, we have the precondition for humans also being healthy, both psychologically and physically. So those two strategies, human health and planet health, or sustainability of the planet, they go very much hand in hand. And as you mentioned, at the same time, there are crises all over the world, such as, the Syrian crisis, which has been ongoing for more than a decade. I mean, in Jordan and Lebanon, in those near areas close to Syria, it's a human tragedy, and we would like to see, some of those young people have a chance in life. We have a strategy of youth empowerment and also female youth empowerment. So on the Syria story, which was 200 million kroner, we really want to make sure that some of those young females, but also young men, get a better chance, whether they're in a refugee camp or out in the civil society, they're still refugees, a better chance of getting a relevant education that can get them a relevant job and give them the dignity that they can actually, have their own family and have their own life without having to depend on subsidies for the rest of their life. So we actually, ever since the foundation was created, have done social and humanitarian work. It's not the major topic of the foundation, but as the foundation has grown to last year, I think have grant awards of 1.3 to 1.4 billion US dollars, social and humanitarian has become a significant part together with all the scientific things.
It's a fascinating, I'll say, ecosystem of projects. I really applaud you for it all, and especially this connection between, obviously you're the pharma company, but healthy environment, healthy food, it's all integrally related. So it's very fascinating to see. Mats, one last question while I have you, and I guess I ask you to put your chief scientific officer hat back on for a moment. Obviously, you've been in the pharma industry, you've seen sort of the progression over the years from small molecules and proteins to now we're in the stem cell era, the messenger RNA, the CRISPRs and the CAR T cells and so forth. Obviously, you're the world's largest endowment. You can always use more money, and so if money was unlimited, what are the areas that get you most excited looking out now? If you said, okay, from now to 2040 or whatever, what are you personally hot on? Is it CRISPR? Is it mRNA technologies? Is it other things that maybe we're not spending any money on? What gets you excited on the therapeutic side still today?
Yeah, so obviously, I think you mentioned CRISPR. I would say the first proof of concept was achieved last year for in vivo gene editing. Yeah. Of course, we want to make sure it's safe, but now a company has shown that you can do in vivo gene editing in a hereditary monogenic disease, where if you just fix that one gene that is disturbed in the individual suffering from it, I think then in vivo gene editing will become a big thing, in particular in more rare diseases that are monogenic or monogenic diseases. I'm also a strong believer in stem cells coming of age. We're not only speaking, for cancer, CAR T, and that kind of modified cells, but also literally replenishing the cells in the brains of people with Parkinson's, in the heart of people with heart failure, in the body of people with type 1 diabetes, etc. I do believe stem cell medicine will come of age, and it's difficult not also to mention mRNA. I think with the mRNA breakthrough that we have seen with the COVID-19 vaccines, this could signal the emergence of RNA-based therapies, both the ones that interfere with RNA, such as the small interfering RNA, which are already getting, approved for several diseases, rare diseases, etc., but also for lowering LDL cholesterol, like with the inclisiran that was approved a few months ago in the US. So we are seeing that RNA-based medicines, either mRNA or interfering with RNA, as well as other genetic medicines such as in vivo gene editing, might actually render classic gene therapy obsolete at some point if we can do in vivo gene editing, where you actually fix the disease on the spot. And then I think we still have to acknowledge there are many biological medicines that will be out there for years to come. We haven't seen the last therapeutic antibody or the last of the peptide hormones therapies. So it is exciting times, and I think there's more optimism in pharma biotech than you have seen for many, many years, typically with more than 50 new medicines being approved annually, which is way higher than it was 15 years ago.
I always joke that I don't recognize the top 10 product list anymore that when it was the Lipitors and the Viagras of the world a couple decades ago. It is really an amazing era, and I'm just amazed once again by everything you're doing there, and really rooting you on. For everybody that is going to be listening to this particular episode across our podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Dr. Mads Krogsgaard Thomsen, Chief Executive Officer of the Novo Nordisk Foundation, focusing on improving people's lives with medicine, diet, environment, social equity. A very impressive portfolio, Mads. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a little while. Obviously, thank you for everything you're doing there at the foundation. As we like to say on this show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow through everything you're doing. It's very, very impressive.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.